right, so what we're going to do, guys, is I'm going to talk to you all about Blood Work 101 today. So some of you guys have probably heard some of this, and even if you guys have heard me talk about blood work before, just hang around because I'm going to do more of a deep dive relating to how can you use blood work to basically reverse engineer your nutrition and supplementation to take yourself to the next level. You know, one of the things, and again, and I mentioned this on all the calls, is that one of the most important things as entrepreneurs is that we understand how much health can affect our productivity. You know, that's, I mean, many of you guys know, you know, on the days where you're feeling foggy, you're feeling tired, you're moody, irritable, you're just not feeling good, how much that affects your productivity, how much it affects your production, your sales conversations, your desire to even just post on social media. And especially if you feel self-conscious about the way that you look. You know, I've spoken to guys before that, maybe 20, 30, 40 pounds overweight, or just weren't happy with the way they looked, even if they weren't like overweight. And when they were honest, they're like, dude, like it's a real big issue. Like I won't post on social media. I won't post the videos. I won't post the content of me in it because I'm embarrassed about the way that I look. And they're like, I know it's affecting like my bottom line. It's affecting my brand influence and my brand reach. So this is really important stuff, guys, when it comes to that. But also, you know, when it comes to being a spouse or a parent too, your ability to optimize, you know, how you show up in the world is key. And for those of you guys who are new, in my teens, for a period of about 10 years, I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder, severe social anxiety, ADHD. I was heavily medicated for 10 years and on a raft of medications, literally to the point where I needed to go get my blood drawn every 2 weeks to check that I didn't have levels of toxicity developing in my system. It's crazy. Now I've been psych med free for about 12 years, and I feel like I've been able to reverse all those challenges I had through understanding blood work and how it relates to nutrition. So think of nutrition, and I talked about this when I gave my talk at Mark's event, the DM Live event, about how nutrition is a bit like software and your body's like a supercomputer. Like your body's like the hardware, meaning, you know, most people, they don't understand that they're inadvertently uploading malware to their computer. And malware is like a virus in the form of junk food, too much caffeine, like processed foods, foods that are aggravating certain markers in their blood work. And they're like, oh my God, I'm not feeling good. I'm just not feeling myself. That's malware on your computer. Like, you're not broken. You just need to get a good operating system update on your computer instead of constantly uploading malware. So why is blood work useful? So blood work, and first of all, blood work is basically, if you've been to the doctor, your primary care physician, typically what they'll do is they'll run a basic panel. Like, a lot of people have had basic panels run, which is usually just your cholesterol levels. It might be some metabolic markers like your immune system markers and things like that. It's not a lot of information. I mean, as much as it might look like a lot of numbers to you, generally speaking, a lot of the stuff that's covered under insurance is very basic. It's not going to tell you that much. And I would go as far to say that a lot of physicians don't have a good understanding about nutrition and preventative measures to optimize you. They'll just look at you like sick care. So they'll say, okay, all your stuff kind of looks okay, go on your way, and they will never give you any real feedback. If something is abnormal and it's really bad, they might even suggest a medication. They usually won't suggest nutritional adjustments or lifestyle adaptation. They'll usually suggest, like, here's a statin for cholesterol, for example, or your blood pressure's high. But they won't ask you, what you're doing with your diet and lifestyle that could be potentially elevating blood pressure. So they'll just give you something for it. So blood work is useful because it basically gives you objective data into your body as to exactly what's happening. So very often, a lot of people guess. So, I had one guy, for instance, who's in the DM family, and he had cancer, and he wasn't even that old. He was in his mid-30s, and he got cancer, and he's in remission now. But one of the diets that he started doing recently was like a carnivore diet, like just all meat diet. And I said to him, okay, so based on your cancer diagnosis, have you run any blood work with this new diet you're doing? And he's like, no. And I'm like, dude, you're crazy. You're absolutely crazy. Like, you're running a diet that promotes massive influxes in IGF-1, which is insulin-like growth factor, which is literally a molecule that grows everything, including cancer. At the very least, run the blood work to see if your body is actually responding to this well or not. And so the cool thing about it, guys, whether it's like keto, plant-based, paleo, whatever your preference, you can actually determine if that diet is good for you. And what I'll tell you this is not the blood type diet. Some people are like, oh, you're saying it's kind of like the blood type diet. And I'm like, no, that's not at all what it is. Like, you don't have, like if you're type O or type whatever, like you don't have some certain way of eating for that type that's good for you per se. What I'm saying is your body's inflammation markers, and I'm going to go through a list of different key markers that you want to get checked and how it relates to how you perform and how you look. And you can actually adjust your nutrition based off those markers, and it will optimize everything. Literally, I'm a byproduct of it, getting off all those psych meds, having massive issues with concentration. Used to be, I was skinny fat, and then I was overweight, and it's like now optimal. So it's an example of like literally practicing what I preach, teaching it to everyone else, and then seeing people replicate it over and over and over again. So when you're thinking about blood work, the reason why most typical blood panels from the doctor fall short is because there's a lot of things missing. Think about blood work a bit like a 100-piece jigsaw puzzle. So you have 100 pieces of these jigsaw puzzles that you need to do to create the puzzle in its entirety. But most standard blood panels are a bit like getting 25 pieces of the puzzle. So you have 25 out of the 100, and then you're tasked with trying to figure out what the image is. You put the 25 pieces kind of together, and you're like, what the hell is that picture? I can't even make it out because there's 75 pieces missing. So, and then you can't make any determinations on what is going on. In many ways, typical blood work is like that. Like I've said, they'll usually just run like a lipid panel, so cholesterol, LDL, HDL. They'll run sort of maybe like your iron levels, your hemoglobin, hematocrit. They'll run some immune system markers. And usually the only time you'll ever see elevation in immune system markers is if you literally are sick and you go get your blood work done while you're sick, like if you have a cold or flu, or if you have cancer or something. So they're checking for that, but they're not checking for all these other things. So like thyroid dysfunction, hormone profile dysfunction, insulin resistance, all these things that contribute to like how you look and feel. So what do we want to order then? What do we want to order, and how do we go about getting it if the standard panels are not very good? So the first thing that I'll tell you is if you go, and again, I can post this, well, in fact, I'll post this in, because I'm on my computer this time, I'll post this in the comment section of the video, or in the Zoom, I should say, in the comment section. I actually have a Superhuman Blood Work Blueprint. Some of you guys have probably got it. It's a free download. And what it is it's basically all the markers that you want to run. So, and it actually gives you a lot of value. Like it walks through, I'll post it in there. So it walks through and it gives you all the markers that you want to run, but it also tells you what each marker means and kind of like what foods or things you need to adjust to optimize that biomarker. If for whatever reason you don't grab it now, if you go to my profile on Facebook, it's one of the links on my cover sheet. So if you click on my cover sheet profile thing, it's like the second link on the cover sheet. So typically when I'm looking at running panels, because right now I'm actually building out a clinic and a process with a physician based out of California who's in the DM family. And we're teaming up because we sort of felt like there was a lot missing in this space. And he has a lot of the means as a physician to be able to order a lot of advanced things that me as a nutritionist cannot, which is a good combination. So the types of things that you want to get checked. And again, what you'll find is that there's a lot more than this. So go and download that Superhuman Blood Work Blueprint. But some of the main ones, and some of these might be common to you, but other ones won't. So vitamin D, for example. Vitamin D is a common one that they do not really run. Why is this important? Because vitamin D, I'll give you an example. So one of the common things that they found with people that got COVID and were hospitalized with COVID was massive deficiencies in vitamin D. Now, why is that? Vitamin D, in many ways, drives immune system function. So if you have, and that's why you find that people get more sick during winter. The reason why they get more sick during winter is because they don't have as much sun exposure. Therefore, their vitamin D levels come down, and vitamin D plays an intimate role in immune system strength. So it doesn't just play a role in immune system strength, but in testosterone production. So not only might you, if you're getting sick often, or you find that you're getting sick more than normal, you definitely want to run your vitamin D levels. If your mood is low, that's also where seasonal depression comes from. You know, it's in different states in the country. There will be like a sort of a surge of seasonal depression. Part of that is that drop in vitamin D does affect brain chemistry and brain health. And so if your mood isn't the best, get your vitamin D checked. As you age, you might find that your testosterone levels start to decrease. That can affect mood. That can affect your general body composition. Get your vitamin D checked, because vitamin D is an upstream precursor to testosterone production. Another one that I think is really important, especially for guys to get, but anyone to get, is your C-reactive protein. So C-reactive protein, or your HSCRP, this is a really important one, because this one literally tells you how much inflammation you have in your body. Like, how likely are you to have a heart attack or stroke, basically. It's like a canary in the coal mine biomarker for how likely you are to have a heart attack or stroke. And I've had people come to me before with levels 3, 4, 5. You want it to be below 1. Below 1. I've seen people with it like 4, 5, even more. And I'm like, oh my God, like, you need to do something about this right now. And the cool thing about a marker like that is you can actually get it down through dietary intervention. Everything that I'm telling you here today, guys, is stuff that you can change. It's not things that are genetically hardwired into you and you're just like stuck. It's things that you can change. And I will talk a little bit about that near the end. Another one that is a common one that does not get run, that you want to get run, is your ApoB. So APOB. ApoB is your small particle LDL. So what happens when you go to the doctor is they'll run your lipids. So your lipids is like your HDL cholesterol, your good cholesterol. They'll run your triglycerides, they'll run your LDL. But it's not as much LDL that you want to look at as it is small particle LDL, or ApoB. That is basically how, ApoB is basically like the more atherogenic particle that literally starts to give you plaque buildup in your arteries. And so especially if you're in your 30s and 40s or even beyond, you want to know what that number is, because if your ApoB is above 100, you are actively laying down plaque in your arterial system. And all it takes is a little bit of that to break off, and it could circulate and then give you a stroke or something. So, and these things are important, guys, because like, we can do all the deals in the world, we can have these thriving businesses, we can do all this stuff, but if you have a stroke or a heart attack and you're completely incapacitated, or something goes wrong, or you're just burned out and exhausted, what's the point? Honestly, what's the point? I've seen what the cost of that is. You know, my dad, for example, bless his heart, he means well, but he's a complete full-blown workaholic that does not look after himself at all. He sleeps probably 4 hours a day, he's overweight, he's got gout, he's got big swollen ankles, and I mean, he could literally ask me anything and I could help change his life, and he doesn't. And he's an example of a guy who's just been a workaholic, doesn't prioritize his health, and he's super inefficient. It takes him like 5 hours to send an email because he's got so much brain fog. You know, so like, this stuff helps you operate faster and more sharply. And talking about operating sharply with like more mental clarity, 2 markers that can be really useful for that is, well, your insulin sensitivity. So some of you guys might have heard of insulin resistance, diabetes, and insulin sensitivity. So things like your hemoglobin A1C and fasting insulin. So some doctors will run hemoglobin A1C. They'll typically run fasting glucose. Fasting glucose really isn't that important, because it literally just tells you what's happening with your blood glucose right now. If you got a bit stressed, like if you almost got into a car accident, your blood glucose would go through the roof because your body would release cortisol, like stress hormones, and that would mobilize sugar into your bloodstream. So literally, if you had a stressful morning, your blood glucose can be high. And it doesn't mean that you're diabetic. But what is more important is your hemoglobin A1C, which is like the 3-month average of your blood glucose level, and fasting insulin. They definitely don't run fasting insulin. So they'll make diabetic diagnosis, or they'll tell you that you don't have diabetes just by looking at hemoglobin A1C. But for instance, if you run fasting insulin and your insulin levels are very, very high, it means that your body is working super hard to try and control your blood glucose, and you're probably actually diabetic and you don't even know it. This is crazy. I've had people come to me and their doctor had not run advanced blood panels on them. They ran advanced blood panels. We got fasting insulin. I literally told them, I think that you're diabetic. And you're like an undiagnosed diabetic. Because they're peeing all the time. They're moody. They're getting cravings. They have massive brain fog. And I'm like, I think you're an undiagnosed diabetic. And then they go to the doctor and they actually confirm it. So they're walking around with a diagnosis. The doctor's not even running all the labs to make a determination. And here I am connecting the dots. So this is to say you cannot just rely on your physician to solve your problems for you. You have to be aggressively responsible. Otherwise, they're just going to give you the minimal stuff. Unless you have a good physician. Again, they're not all bad. I'm definitely not throwing them all under the bus here. There are some really good ones. Like the guy that I'm teaming up with, he's very good. But there's other people out there that are just completely useless. So hemoglobin and A1C and fasting insulin. Because if you can improve your insulin sensitivity, you can reduce cravings, you can improve energy levels, mood, and there's a number of things that can help improve insulin sensitivity. I'll give you some real world examples. So regular weight training, walking for 5 or 10 minutes after meals, herbs like berberine is one, cinnamon. So if you add cinnamon to your protein shake, cinnamon to your fruit, that helps control blood glucose. Like I said, berberine is another. Chromium is another mineral that can help with blood glucose metabolism. So if you're combining weight training with walking after meals, with some berberine or some cinnamon, and you are, and even some cold exposure, like the old cold plunge or cold shower helps reset insulin sensitivity. That stuff is literally things you can do to improve those numbers. So it's a beautiful example of how you're not just like at the mercy of life where you don't have a say in this. You can maximize all of these things, guys, all of them. Another one that a lot of the guys love to talk about is total and free testosterone. I had one guy, for instance, come to me a while back and he was chuffed that his total testosterone was so high. And I said to him, well, what's your free testosterone? And he showed me and it was low. And I'm like, dude, it doesn't matter what your total is if your free is low. Like the total means nothing. It's what matters. What matters is your free. And I'll give you an example. So you can have someone that has high testosterone or even normal, and they might still have low testosterone symptoms because their free testosterone is low. Now, what would cause free testosterone to be low if your total is high? There's a hormone called sex hormone binding globulin, or SHBG. You want to get SHBG checked because I'll give you an example. So if your total testosterone is 800, but your sex hormone binding globulin is high, like say 60 or 70, that sex hormone binding globulin is going to bind up a lot of the total testosterone. It binds to it. It makes it inert. You cannot use it. And so you will have, because it binds up so much of the total, you actually have a low level of testosterone. Again, another example of if you get your blood work done and you know this to be the case, foods high in boron can help bring down SHBG. So prunes, like I would get one of my students to do a couple of prunes post-workout. Or alternatively, there is some mineral drops by a brand called Concentrace. So Concentrace trace mineral drops. They're high in boron. you can add the mineral drops to your water. It will pull down SHBG and liberate more total testosterone. So you might go to the doctor and they go, oh, look, you're going to need testosterone replacement therapy. But if your diet's full of processed foods, you're drinking alcohol, you're not optimizing your sleep, you've got like sleep apnea, you have high SHBG, like you can fix all of those things and you don't have to jump down the pharmaceutical route. Now, there might be a time where you've addressed those things and it still doesn't work. And in that case, cross each bridge as it comes. And the same thing rings true for the women. So a lot of women, as they go through pre and perimenopause, these sort of menopausal changes, you might notice things like increase in cravings, random increased weight gain, or just like your fat distribution changes. So all of a sudden you might have been athletic your whole life and now you sort of look like a pear shape. You're like, what the hell's going on? Like, why am I holding, I'll give you an example. So estrogen dominance is typically, the shape of the body, when you're estrogen dominant is usually like a pear shape. And then for women, if they have too high testosterone and they have insulin resistance, it's when they look like an apple. So an apple meaning like they have thinner arms and legs, but they have a big belly, like a big sort of gut. Whereas the women that have like all their body fat through their hips, butt, and thighs like a pear shape, they tend to be estrogen dominant. Now, if you know that to be the case, there could be things that you can do. So one thing that my wife did, because she was on birth control for the longest time, because when she was a teenager, she would get very painful menstrual cycle, and they told her that the birth control would help reduce that pain. And obviously once she got off that, your hormones are all just dysregulated. And so she used a bioidentical progesterone cream. So if you know these types of things, you can use something targeted and specific. Another thing that I've had women do that maybe were sort of running into infertility issues is what's called seed cycling. So seed cycling is basically where at each stage during like luteal phase and different phases in your menstrual cycle for the ladies or for the wives and in many of the guys' cases, if you search seed cycling, female hormones, it will tell you to add in a different seed at different stages of the cycle. And the principle behind this is that each seed breaks down and converts into certain minerals. So, an example is like Brazil nuts, they're high in selenium. Selenium helps with testosterone production. So each food, guys, is like software. And if you understand what is going on hormonally, you can add foods into your diet that break down into the right minerals and actually improve those numbers. A good example, like if you know your estrogen is really high and you're getting that sort of estrogenic effect, foods that are high in a compound called DIM. So DIM, you can actually get a DIM supplement, D-I-M. If you search DIM supplement on Amazon, it's an estrogen metabolizer. So kale and broccoli, cruciferous vegetables, are high in DIM. And so if you know that you're having issues with estrogen, add more cruciferous vegetables in or add in a DIM supplement. That estrogen metabolizer helps clear out a lot of that surplus estrogen. So again, great examples of if you know what is happening chemically in your body, you can adjust. Other ones that I think are really important that they won't always run, especially for the guys, is your PSA or your prostate-specific antigens. The most common cancer in men is prostate cancer. And if you get it early, your chances of survival are massive. If you catch it late, it's not good. Now, they won't usually run PSA unless you like explain that you're having like you frequent urinate, like unless you tell them something's going on, they won't run that. I'll give you an example. So like I'll get PSA run on my students in part because, for any guy that's on testosterone replacement therapy, for example, you don't want to see, if you see elevations in PSA, you should not be on TRT. It will massively, potentially increase your chances of prostate cancer if they're elevated already. If they're not elevated, it won't do anything. But it's a good example of like, you need to know what is going on. Another one, like I mentioned, my dad with his big swollen ankles with his gout, is uric acid. So some of you guys might have had experiences with uric acid before. It's like an inflammatory marker. So if you're getting like a lot of joint swelling and joint pain, almost like rheumatoid arthritis type stuff, and gout, uric acid is obviously a common one. Again, you can get uric acid levels down through diet. So you don't need to be pounding medications and pharmaceuticals to control these things. I would actually tell you that that's the last thing you would want to do. You want to optimize your diet first. So how does this all relate to diet? So basically, what you would do, guys, is you get your blood work run, and then the things that you see abnormal, you could go to either Google or even ChatGPT. So obviously there's AI now, which is very useful. And you could say for instance, if your estrogen was really high, healthy foods that help lower estrogen, or what foods raise estrogen, and literally look at those lists and start to make changes. This is what I obviously do. So like if any of you guys are like, man, I don't want to have to do all that stuff. I just want someone who's got this knowledge to help me. I'm the guy. But if you do want to like learn using Google and ChatGPT and plugging it in, so you might say, okay, my testosterone is low. And you might say, what minerals help increase testosterone levels? And it might say magnesium, zinc, selenium, vitamin D. So you might go, okay, well, I'll add some vitamin D in. Then you might say, okay, it says selenium. Healthy foods high in selenium. And it'll say like Brazil nuts. So you're like, oh, well, I'll start getting some Brazil nuts, adding those into my routine. You might say what foods are high in magnesium. And it might say cacao nibs. So you're like, okay, well, what I'll do is I'll get some cacao nibs and I'll throw that on into my smoothie each day. Can you see here how you can literally take the food that creates the mineral, that cascades over and creates the chemical in your body to fix the thing? And this is the power that most people don't realize they have. It's immense power. It's what's taken me from being this bipolar, severe socially anxious, ADHD-ridden train wreck to like where I am now. And it's life-changing. And I want that for you guys, especially people in the DM Alliance. You guys are there because you're already successful in some way. And you're there because you have higher ambitions for yourself. And this is a conduit for that. And this even ties into how it affects mood. Last week, I think it was last week or maybe the week before, I talked about the Braverman test. So the Braverman test was like a brain chemistry test. It's free. So if you go search Braverman test on Google, you do that test, and it will give you an approximation of like your brain chemicals. So your GABA, acetylcholine, serotonin, and dopamine. Again, another example of foods and it will give you foods in the test results. It will tell you what foods you can use to optimize serotonin, what foods you can use to optimize dopamine. And that is what helps you feel better mentally. That's what reduces anxiety, what helps mood. So again, this ties back into all of this stuff. And even as much as I would say as far as like cravings and fat loss, I find a lot of people who get a lot of cravings, who struggle with fat loss, they've got a lot of inflammation in their body, they have a lot of insulin resistance. And if they can start optimizing those things, it is absolutely game-changing. Absolutely game-changing. So that's it in a nutshell, guys. I mean, I know it was a lot. What I would do is I'm going to hit stop record here because that's like the meat of it. If you guys have any questions, drop them in the comments. One thing that I want to say, like I said, was go to my page or click in the comments and download the free Superhuman Blood Work Blueprint, because in there it's got everything that you need. It's got like it's got a full list of the markers. I mean, there's a whole lot of them. It's got a full list. It's got, like one of the reasons why I am setting up this venture with this physician in California is so we can run these types of panels. So, and we're very close to getting it operational. So if you guys want these detailed labs done, you can go through independent labs. Like there's one called Marek Health, M-A-R-E-K, Marek Health. But again, you could come to us. We might even be able to do it for cheaper. And then obviously I can do a complimentary review for you guys and tell you what I see. Because if you've never done it, and one of the things I'll tell you is that it's very hard to get this stuff run under insurance, guys. If you try and get stuff run under insurance, it's going to be bare minimum. It's going to be just the bare bones. You're much better off trying to pay out of pocket. But if you want to try and get it run under insurance and you feel like your physician is kind of proactive, What I would suggest you do is when you go to the doctor, tell them that you're just feeling really crap. Tell them that like you're not sleeping well, your libido's low, your joints are aching, you're getting cravings. Pretty much riddle off like every ailment you can think of. Because then at that point, they're gonna say, well, we have a potential diagnosis, and because we have a potential diagnosis, we can now run it under insurance. Isn't that so silly? Like literally you have to be diseased before insurance wants to mess with you. Like they don't care about you being proactive. Like forget that. They're like, oh, you want to be proactive? Oh, you can go pay for it, buddy. See you later. You know, so you're better off just paying out of pocket. So Richie says, where is the physician in California? I'd actually have to check. I'm not even 100% sure. Like we talk quite a bit, but I haven't, I can't, in fact, let me pull it. I think he may have it on his profile. Let me just tell you quickly. Give me 1 second, guys. Let me see if he has it on his profile. He may not. He says Cameron Park, California. He's from Laguna Beach, but he lives in Cameron Park, wherever that is. I'm not sure. But we are going to be working on doing like a national domestic thing. So it's going to be, we can do it online. Basically, what we want to do is we want to create a system where we can get the blood work run. We can then give you your optimal diet. We can give you any compounded supplementation that you need. If there's any medications you do need for whatever reason, again, last resort, you can get the medications through him. There'll even be a meal prep service that we will integrate into it that will complement the nutritional needs that you need. So it's going to be a very one-stop shop type thing where you just get the test done and then you get all the customized stuff that you need to take you to like a 2.0 version. So guys, did you have any questions? If you do have questions that arise later on, just drop me a message on Facebook. Because I know sometimes if you're busy, if you're driving, if you're working, whatever, you might not be able to message me straight away. But absolutely feel free to drop me a message on Facebook. If I haven't responded to you yet, I will get back to you very soon. But I would tell you this. Really get the blood work stuff done, because things like C-reactive protein, you need to know those numbers, especially because like I think a lot of the people in the DM Alliance are sort of in their 40s, 50s, and at that age, this stuff is really important. I think of it almost like a duty to my family. Like I don't want to have, because I think to myself, man, imagine if I had like a stroke or something, and I was like sort of incapacitated, how difficult that would be for my wife and daughter. You know, and again, you never know what could happen to you. You could get hit by a car and be incapacitated. So, but at the same time, you can play odds and you can think, how can I set myself up so I don't run into these things, Richard says, have you seen Dr. Murrick on cancer reduction? And that name is familiar, but I have done a lot of research regarding cancer with diet, because I think that when it comes to cancer growth, I think that it is very heavily driven by diet and environment. So your diet, obviously, like the things you put into your body will literally create inflammation or proliferate cell growth, or it will control it. Equally, things in your environment. Some people don't even think about like the chemicals in their environment, like cleaners, household cleaners, sprays, colognes, like chemicals that absorb through your skin. Think about this. When someone's trying to quit smoking, they put a nicotine patch on their arm. The patch absorbs dermally through their skin. Your skin is like a giant absorption site. And so for anyone that's got autoimmune issues or cancers, you need to vet your environment and make sure that it's like as chemical free as possible. Yeah, Richard, send it to me. I'm very curious to hear. I definitely think that, I'll tell you a real quick story, real quick. There was a guy that came to me like 2 years ago, and he'd already had cancer once, and it had come back. And he's like, oh, Jesus, it's back. And it was like in a weird location. It was like growing in his muscle, like against his bone. And they were really worried that, thank you, I'll copy the link. They were really worried that it was because it was against his bone, it was going to go and metastasize into his bones and just go everywhere. And he came to me. And I mean, I guess he just heard about things that I had done, and he came to me. And I ran him through some really intense protocols. I mean, I threw everything, including the kitchen sink at this. It was crazy. And he had a surgery scheduled to have his arm amputated, literally above the shoulder joint. It wasn't even going to be amputated below the shoulder joint so he could move. It was literally going to be cut above. And he was like, I'm ready to do it. I'm ready to go. Like he mentally accepted this idea that he would have his arm removed. And we had 8 weeks till the surgery. And I was like, damn. So I just threw everything at him. I had no idea if this would work. And even to this day, I'm not going to claim that like what I did somehow had a, he's a man of faith. He sort of puts it up to God and also like to the diet. But there was a lot of stuff we did. We did a niacin sauna detox protocol, intermittent fasting, juice fasting cycles. Like we hammered him with like a strictly plant-based raw diet. It was like very intense. And I kid you not, he got a biopsy done like a couple of days before the surgery was scheduled. And he went in the morning of, he was going into the surgery to get his arm chopped off. And that morning, one of the doctors came in and said, we're getting like really conflicting data here. Like, it seems like there's no reading for anything. Like, we need to check this again before we run into surgery. And they checked it, and the cancer was gone. It was freaking gone. And I mean, he cried. Like, he couldn't believe it. And he had no other intervention. And again, I'm not saying that it was like what I did. I have no idea what it was, to be honest. But I do think it was at least something to do with that. And I'm telling you, there is so much power to healing, guys. I mean, I know that, for example, like Travis's wife is going through some stuff. And I truly think that with the right mindset and the right tools, I've seen people like heal themselves miraculously. It's freaking beautiful. So, I mean, I truly think that that's possible for Tara, brother. For you guys, you're going to have a success story, for real.